Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me. So today we're going to get back into some more esoteric topics, and I especially want to address this because I know that I have family members that have recently joined the channel that want to understand why I believe what I believe. So here we go. Now, if any of this sounds like I'm being overconfident, it's not me being overconfident, it's me being firm in my belief system and the fact that I've done the predicated and necessary research to come to these determinations. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I can prove that the earth is flat and stationary, because that requires a burden of proof that I don't necessarily have the tools to facilitate. However, I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that your fundamentalist religious belief in a spinning ball flying through space is absolute nonsense and has no tangible scientific evidence to present or back up this fact. Now, with that being said, allow me to get into one of my biggest proofs that you are not living on a spinning ball flying through space like you've been taught since infancy. Since the time that you walked into that classroom in kindergarten or preschool and saw a globe and were indoctrinated into the religion called the heliocentric model. So, all of us are very familiar with the fact that our tires on our car contain air. And the reason that our tires inflate is because we add more and more air until the air pressure creates a desired effect that we can drive down the road smoothly. Now, we all know if we take that tire away and we put air around the rim of our car, the air will not stay in place, but rather equalize with the environment around it. Good luck driving your car on rims. Now, why is this relevant? Well, it's relevant because the vacuum of space cannot exist next to the atmosphere of our Earth without the atmosphere of our Earth being pulled off into space. Now, I know, gravity, right? Well, what gravity are you talking about? Are you talking about matter being attracted to matter or mass being attracted to mass? Well, if that's the case, then you're already fundamentally wrong in your belief system, because that was done away with when Einstein introduced the concept of relativity, doing away with everything that Newton ever taught. Therefore, when you sit here and tell me that the atmosphere is attracted to Earth because the Earth has a bigger mass, I'm going to call you out on it and say, you can't say that. Nor can you point to the Cavendish experiment, even though it's not an experiment because there's no independent or dependent variable. However, if you want to point to Cavendish, I'm going to tell you tough shit. Because guess what? The only reason there was any attraction between those balls was because they were placed on a torsion bar, which is a man-made device. And on top of that, it all goes back to Newton, which was done away with Einstein. Okay, now we're going to get to my second fundamental evidence that we are not living on a spinning ball flying through space, and that is simply that everything my eyes see is observably flat. Observably flat, there's no doubt about it. You have never ever seen the curvature of Earth. Now, you can be like George, and we all know who I'm talking about if you're a family member, and you can tell me that you've flown on a plane or that you've seen curvature from a plane, but I'm going to tell you right now that you haven't, because Neil deGrasse Tyson himself, the godfather of physics who you see on TV all the time, has told us undeniably over and over again that you cannot hope to see the curvature of the Earth unless you're at least 120,000 feet in the air. Now, if you're a family member, we all know that George was a helmsman for the Coast Guard, correct? He was responsible for the navigation of that ship, right? He used radar on a regular basis. His eyes every single day out on that horizon saw a flat and level horizon. And in fact, the radar that George used to operate that Coast Guard frigate or ship that he was on, okay, was 100% dependent on the Earth being a flat and stationary object, okay? Because the way radar works is it shoots a beam straight out. Straight out. There's no curving to this beam at all, okay? No curve at all. It shoots it straight out. It hits its object and it comes straight back, okay? Now, the Earth is supposed to curve 8 inches per mile squared. 8 inches the first mile, 16 the second, 32 the third, 64 the fourth, and so on. Now, if that's the case, how could you ever hope to use radar on an open ocean and expect to hit your target? You can't. George, out of anybody, if he thought about it with an open mind, would come to the conclusion, based on his own experience, that the earth is flat. Period. The end. Everything we've ever seen is flat. Go to the ocean and look out. Look out at the horizon, take a ruler after you've taken a picture of it and put it up to that horizon, and it is flat. If you can present curvature to me, I can point you in the direction of at least $75,000 worth of money being offered by different people right now. So, want to take me up on that offer? I'm more than welcome to see your evidence. However, you don't have any because I've spent the last 4 years trying to claim that money. Now, the reason that a lot of you are going to sit here and tell me that I'm absolutely crazy is because of cognitive dissonance. Now, if any of you remember when I brought this up at Easter, everybody jumped on me all at once. Mike, George, Dan, Tommy, all of you. Now, that's understandable. But the thing is, man, none of you guys are ever willing to listen to the evidence presented without obfuscating away from the fact, which is why I'm not claiming that the earth is flat in this demonstration, but I know for a fact that it's not spinning because you guys can't give me any proof that it is. There's not one experiment that I myself can do standing on the ground by myself without depending on NASA or a government agency that proves that the earth is spinning. Not a single experiment. I can't find any earth curvature anywhere. Not a single source. So why in the world would you ever place faith in a government agency that you know has lied to you? You know for a fact that they have on several occasions, and it's not even tantamount to going to space. If they've lied to you about something as simple as to where your tax money is going, okay, why wouldn't they lie to you about the mechanism that allows them to collect that tax money? Now, a lot of you are going to ask me, based on all of this stuff that I've said, well, is everybody in on it? No. The guys making these satellites, they're not in on it. They're actually building a satellite. However, if you look up some NASA programs, you'll find that NASA just happens to be the biggest consumer in the entire world of helium. Now, why is that? Well, if you do a little bit deeper digging, you find out that NASA actually takes a lot of these satellites that are being built, and instead of shooting them up into space, what they do is they attach them to either a hydrogen or helium balloon, and they send them up. And these things can stay up there for up to 5 years. Now, it gets even more interesting because a lot of these balloons have crashed in remote regions where people haven't been able to get there and clean up the evidence before, the public finds it. And it turns out that a lot of these are actually weather, radar, communication satellites that are supposed to be in space, right? Now, if that was the only piece of evidence pointing to them lying to us about what they're supposed to be sending up in space, I may be able to dismiss it. But the fact that we're even having this argument is begging the question of space existing, and I've already explained to you the laws of thermodynamics clearly state that, you can't have space, but just for shits and giggles, I'm going to humor you. Now, if you look at some of this other research that I've done into NASA, you will soon come to see that there was a pair of divers that were out in the Pacific Ocean, and they were diving at this site, and they found a bunch of NASA space junk. Well, it turns out after deeper research into where this space junk came from, it turns out that a lot of this junk was actually components of spacecraft that should have been jettisoned out into space. It should have never landed back on the surface of the Earth. It should have been lost in space for all of time. However, if you go to this NASA graveyard in the Pacific Ocean, you will find spacecraft and parts of spacecraft that aren't supposed to be there. Now, if you look at NASA launches, when they supposedly shoot a rocket up or a SpaceX launch, you'll notice something very interesting. It never goes straight up in the air, which is the most efficient way to leave the Earth's atmosphere if you were going to send something up. Rather, it takes a parabolic arc and disappears over the horizon. Well, I'm going to tell you right now that I don't believe that these objects are going into space at all. Rather, they are simply shooting a rocket off and having it land in the Pacific Ocean. There's no other explanation for these parts of these spaceships to have been found in the ocean. Period. The end. Now, another thing that leads me to believe that the Earth is a flat and stationary plane and not a globe is the fact that if you were to circumnavigate Antarctica on your own, let's just say you could do it, because right now you can't. There's a treaty called the Antarctic Treaty where 47 countries have signed up and nobody is allowed access below the 60th degree parallel in the southern oceans without government approval. And I mean government approval from every single one of those signing bodies. By the way, it's the biggest and longest lasting treaty ever signed by anybody. Okay, so why are they trying to keep us away from there? However, there was a man that did this back in the day before the governments decided, hey, you're not allowed to go down there. And his name was Captain Cook. Now, if you look at the distance that it takes to circumnavigate the Earth at its equator, it's about 26,000 miles, okay? Now, let's go down to Antarctica. It should take a third of the time to circumnavigate Antarctica as it does the equator. However, if you are to circumnavigate Antarctica today, it would take you 3 times as long to circumnavigate Antarctica as the equator. And you're thinking, how can this be possible? Well, I'm going to tell you why. It's because Antarctica is actually a ring surrounding the outside of our known world. Now, Alan, you're crazy. You have no evidence to support this. Try again. I'm not going to sit here and present something to you guys that isn't true, okay? There's a guy named Captain Cook in the 1700s who decided, 1600s, 1700s, somewhere around there. His name's Captain Cook. Took several expeditions to the southern oceans. Well, during that time, he circumnavigated Antarctica. Now, as I told you before, Antarctica should be 1/3 the distance of our equator. That's not the case. Not according to Captain Cook, who just happened to be one of the most legendary sailors ever, and his research is cited to this day, okay? He circumnavigated Antarctica at a distance of 69,000 nautical miles, 65 to 69,000 nautical miles, okay? And on top of that, it took him over 3 years to do so. But even more interestingly, while he was sailing, he was always 12, sometimes as far as 27 nautical miles off of his reckoning, which means he was covering far less ocean than he should have been according to the longitude and latitudinal charts that he was using to sail, which means there is more ocean in the south than our charts account for. The only logical explanation is the model that you guys present with the heliocentric model is complete nonsense. Complete nonsense. There's no way that you can circumnavigate Antarctica at 69,000 miles if the Earth is in fact a globe. And on top of that, why would every single government in the entire world who has a modern economy and the means to go down to Antarctica sign a treaty preventing its citizens from going there unless there was something to hide? Now, you guys have to at least admit that. They are trying to hide something if we're not allowed to go there. Now, we can take things a step further here, and I can further prove to you that Antarctica is a ring around the outside of our known world as opposed to the South Pole. And I can do so simply by presenting the fact that there has been no living human being besides the cousin of the Queen of England who has ever circumnavigated the Earth north to south. Now, there has been people that has gone from the North Pole down through South America, went to the South Pole, turned around, and came back the other way. I'm not denying that that's happened, because it has, and that works perfectly with the model that I'm telling you. However, nobody has ever started at the North Pole, went down through South America, got to the South Pole, and came up the other side. That's never happened. Not once in recorded human history. The only person that has claimed to do so, like I said, is the Queen's cousin. Therefore, he was provided all of his funding by a government. Need I say more? If that's the only verified account of this happening, then I'm not going to follow suit and say that it happened. A, because it goes against all logic, and B, because the Bible simply says that if one man sees something, let it not be taken as fact, but if two or three, then let it be said it's fact. Period. The end. So until the time comes where I can see a 24/7 live feed of somebody making that trip, then it never happened. Period. The end. Now, all of this, in and of itself, one by one, these pieces of evidence may seem iffy, but you can't look at it as a one-by-one evidentiary finding here. That's not the way things work in court, right? Interestingly enough, there was a guy named Zen Garcia. He's a very prominent flat earther. He put up a challenge where he said he would give $15,000 to anybody who could prove at 2 independent sites using the same experiment that the earth was curved. Somebody supposedly did this. They called Zen Garcia up, gave him the evidence, said, I want my money. Zen said, this isn't tangible evidence, there's flaws in your experimentation, this proves nothing. Okay, so the guy decides to take him to civil court. This is where things get very interesting. The guy presents all of his evidence to the judge. Zen makes his counter case, exactly what would happen in the court system. And guess what? Zen kept his $15,000 and the guy's paying for attorney's fees. He did not prove that the earth is curved, spinning, in motion, a ball. He could have done any of those things. However, he failed to do everything, and in front of the eyes of a judge, failed to meet the burden of proof. How is that possible? For the last 1,500 years, we have been told that the earth is a spinning ball flying through space. However, when an average person is brought to court and tries to prove this beyond all shadow of a doubt, he falls short. You see, a court, unlike society, doesn't deal in emotion. And the only reason that I am met with such a knee-jerk visceral reaction from you guys for having this belief is because you are relying on emotion. Take yourself out of the equation and open your eyes to realize everything you have ever seen tells you that the earth is flat, stationary, and not moving. Do you feel the earth moving underneath your feet? No, you don't. You tell me that the Coriolis effect is a thing. Well, yeah, it's a thing, but however, we don't observe it. Not like you think we do. You tell me that when you shoot a bullet, okay, that bullet, ever so slightly, is altered by the rotation of the earth underneath the bullet. Well, if that's the case, then why when I take off in a helicopter can I not get to LA by just hovering from New York? Should be able to. It's the same physics. You have to understand, you can't have it both ways. And that's what happens all the time. When I was talking about gravity earlier, that's exactly what happens. You fall back on Newton's gravity without realizing Newton's gravity was done away with when Einstein was introduced into the equation. But that's not your fault. That's not your fault because you know why? They don't want you knowing that they're two completely different definitions for the same thing and nullify each other. The reason they don't want you to is because they cherry pick which use of gravity they use all the time. They use Newton's law of gravity when it suits their fancy. They use Einstein's law of gravity when it suits their fancy, and they interchange them in their model whenever it suits their fancy. It's not how it works. Only one can be true. Only one can be true. Now, You want to believe that the Earth is a vacuum of space. That it's a vacuum sitting next to a vacuum and space is a vacuum, right? Well, I have a question for you. Have you ever tried to fire a rocket inside of a vacuum? It can't be done. Now, I'm telling you right now that there's experiments with small vacuum chambers. Yes, they've used oxidizers to fire a rocket and the rocket moves. But the vacuum wasn't on when they fired that rocket, because if it was, it wouldn't have moved. What they did is they removed all the air from that chamber and they turned the vacuum chamber off. So when they fire that rocket and cause the oxidization to fire it, it creates an off gas which fills that container full of gas and allows the rocket to move. If they kept that vacuum chamber on and kept removing the gas as that rocket was fired, the rocket would go nowhere. So why is this a problem? Well, it's a problem because when you tell me that we took a rocket back in the 60s to go to the moon, I want to know, what did that rocket thrust push off of? If it's in the vacuum of space and the gas that it's off-gassing equalizes instantly with the vacuum, then how is that rocket moving? Now, ask yourself, how? If somebody like me can point out all of these flaws in less than 20 minutes, ask yourself, how much of a foundation do you really have for your beliefs? And that's why I told you at the very beginning that your beliefs are a fundamental religious belief in a spinning ball flying through space, because you have no tangible scientific evidence to back you up. And if you think you do, bring it at me, man, because I'll dismantle it piece by piece. I've spent 4 years of my life dedicated to this. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let any of you tell me I'm crazy without actually sitting here and having this debate with me. Period. The end. Don't take it personally. But when I have my entire family sit there and laugh at me and act like I'm stupid, you better be prepared for some adverse reaction. Because you're not even going to sit down and be willing to have this debate with me after hearing this. I guarantee it. And if you are, I'll have a hell of a lot more respect from you and for you. Because I don't say these things just to say them. I don't say them to be eccentric. I don't seek attention. In fact, I don't even like going to family gatherings because of the attention that I get, okay? But I'm firm in my beliefs because I know they're true. And I will die by them because I know they're true. That's all I have for you today. God bless. And for all of my fans and subscribers that have heard this all before, let it serve as a refresher. Because there's a lot of things that we overlook on a day-to-day basis. God bless. Have a great day.